Welcome to Heart Riffing, a podcast by way of the heart. Here we explore what it means to reconnect with your essence and live from a place of personal freedom. If you're interested in learning more about our courses, mentoring and workshops, feel free to visit wayoftheheart.com.au. We're so glad you're here and we hope you enjoy the episode. Hi and welcome back to Heart Riffing. Today we are doing our second part for the two-part series that we randomly decided that we were going to do.
Yeah.
In the previous episode, we looked at 5 different pain points and we kind of linked that to Taoism.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to continue with 5 more.
Okay. Should we recap our first? Should we say what our first 5 were?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go back. So we're looking at these pain points. So these are the ones we kind of spoke about last week.
Yeah.
What are we talking about?
So there was humans lost their naturalness.
Yep.
People became over-contrived.
Yep.
Everyone started living as a role instead of a person.
Yeah.
Inner fragmentation became the norm.
Yeah.
And people disconnected from the natural world.
Yes. And we were linking those issues to a period of time, which I called the tribal wars, I think, but they weren't tribal wars, they were the state wars. And we were linking those to a period of time sort of, going back, I don't know, 300, 400 BC. I can't remember the exact time frame. But it was these kind of issues, this great separation between people and a more natural rhythm. What the Taoists would end up calling Tao or way. That for them they left this kind of this split between humanity or the humans that they were relating and nature, and they went back to basics and they found that there was an organic rhythm, a natural flow, that everything in the natural world actually had an inner intelligence to it, and that what they were experiencing were cultures and situations which separated them from that natural rhythm, that Tao, that flow, that way, which they called like sort of like so such or as is, or Suzanne, T-Z-U-Z-A-N. Suzanne was this idea of as it is, isness, if you want. Mm-hmm. Isness is a cheesy term and some people don't like it, but they were saying, as it is, which for them was like things are showing up as they actually are. Whereas in the world that they had experienced during the state war period, people were separate from that. They weren't who they were. They weren't essential or organic or natural. There was all these other fragmentations going on. So we're going to cover 5 more fragmentations, and obviously these kind of things, I think we're seeing show up in our society as well. So they are pain points. They're not your normal pain points, but they're still pain points. Okay.
Cool.
Thanks for the number 6.
Yeah, number 6. Clever minds replaced quiet perception.
How good's that?
So good.
So good.
I really like that. And the note here that is, the Taoists were explicit. Cleverness became a disease.
Yeah, great.
It's true too. Like intellectualism is currency in this.
Well, words are currency too. I mean, that's the thing that, that the first lines of the Tao Te Ching is that, the way that can be spoken is not the true way, is not the true Tao, So the Tao that can be spoken is not the Tao, was their way of saying that this natural thing, this natural way of living basically had nothing to do with words or cleverness, that the rhythm, what I like to call the breathing in and the breathing out of the universe, sunrise, sunset, tide in, tide out, seasons folding into seasons, the beautiful metaphor that they had, which isn't really a metaphor, but it's just a reflection on reality, things moving from absence into presence, and then moving from presence into absence again. And so the conversation being, it's not there, but it's born, it emerges, it takes upon a form. The form grows, matures, slowly dissolves, and disappears again into formlessness. So they were noticing all of that, and they were noticing that all of that took place without words. And so for them, clever words were like, yeah, don't really need it. So if you think of all intellectualism and all sort of, the heady stuff, it's always built on words. It's built on this, someone's ability to string words together or create an argument or, to convince others of how intelligent their position is. And so you're always being sort of recruited back into something. But for them, it was like, no, we're not convinced by that.
Oh.
That's not how the seasons shift. That's not what brings the sun up and the moon up. That's not what, causes the tide to shift. That's not what causes the leaves to fall or the crops to sprout or the fish to, it doesn't cause anything.
Mm-hmm. And
so they weren't impressed by it. And then if you play that back into our pain point today, we're just swamped with data. We're swamped with words. We're swamped with opinions, and people seek that. People seek out that,
I think it's also that those words and opinions are used as a crutch or as a substitute for genuine engagement with essence and genuine movement from that space, because everything has to be justified and reasoned and defended. I think that it's probably worth calling out or noting that I don't think that we're anti-intellectual. Like, I think that over-reliance on words, sure, is not great, but I think that words are also powerful, and it can be a really useful tool to understanding yourself better and to understanding concepts better. Like, we wouldn't be at this point with Way of the Heart being developed as it is if you hadn't had access to, a litany of language. It kind of opens a world, but it's the reliance on that and the use of that as a substitute that becomes problematic, right?
Or deeper than that, it's the fact that the words replace the thing. The words aren't the thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's the point. But see, in Western culture is, brought up largely on a Judeo-Christian kind of philosophical framework, a Greek and then Judeo-Christian framework, right? And in all of those, in both, Greek and Judaism and Christianity, there's this conversation often in the wisdom literature of this thing called the logos.
Yeah.
The word, right? So I think it's John's gospel. It says, in the beginning was the word, and the word was with God, and the word was God. And it talks about how and then if you look at the very first part of the book of Genesis, the first book of the Bible, in the beginning, God said, right? And so within the framework of Western Christianity, what happens is the word is a creative tool, right? The word, God spoke and the world comes into being. Jesus, is the word, and everything that was made through, everything that we see was made through him. So there's this kind of, you're set up from the get-go to not just see words as pointing to a substance, but the words create the substance. The words are divine. Like in Western culture, words are divine. Like words are like what God uses to create stuff. Mm-hmm. God speaks forth the universe. And so we come from a background where like words are super powerful. The Eastern culture comes from a place where, because they're agrarian, because they were farmers, they come from a culture where, you don't need words to make the rice grow. Mm-hmm. The orange tree is going to produce oranges, and I don't need to go out there and I don't speak the oranges into being. So in deeply agrarian cultures, there's a different emphasis, and the word is not sovereign. The elemental thing is the sovereign, and the words point to the element. In our culture, I think we've got it the other way around. We have words almost like we've we've kind of deified words. That's what the gods do. They use words to curse people or bless people, and I think you're exactly right. I don't think we want to slide into an anti-intellectual space, but I do think it's worth saying that argumentation isn't a thing in itself.
Mm-hmm.
An opinion that's not embodied, it's just an opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Like the thing that I'm passionate about with Way of the Heart in my own life is it's not a philosophy that I have. It's a way. It's the way that I live. So when a person doesn't inhabit, I think getting back to our pain point, when a person doesn't inhabit their words, when there's no substance behind the words, then what you have is you just have a lot of opinions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're getting close to that. It's like we have a lot of opinions around the world about a lot of things, about politics, about left, right, about this. At the end of the day, it's not the words.
Yeah.
It's the substance that stands behind the words.
And it's funny too, because I feel like we're almost forced into having an opinion.
Completely.
We are an increasingly divided society.
Yeah.
It's increasingly black, white, good,
Polarized.
bad, polarized. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so you're almost demanded to have a position on almost everything.
Yeah.
And so to sort of step back and go, I actually can't, in good faith or in integrity, really embody a position on this at all. Who am I to, embody?
Yeah, it's a real challenge, isn't it?
It really is. Totally.
It's a real challenge to go, I've got an opinion, but is there any evidence that I actually live out my opinion? That's the thing that Taoists were passionate about. It's like, not interested in an opinion, not interested in intellectualism. What I'm interested in is I'm interested in the substance of the thing that stands behind the opinion. And if there's no substance behind the opinion, it's just an opinion. That's the kind of, and I think that's real for us because we're, like you say, we have many, many opinions about lots of different stuff, and yet none of it really matters if it's not embodied.
I think that the embodiment thing is a challenge in and of itself too, right? Because that requires some deep thought and a deep knowing of yourself and what you do and don't stand for. And like I think it's easy to look at somebody else and go, oh, you just have an opinion but you're not actually embodying this in XYZ. I think it takes more awareness and development to look at yourself and go, what am I, where am I hollow in my words? What am I, speaking into the void about but not actually embodying?
Yeah, completely. I mean, that has been my great problem, I think, in terms of my own spiritual development, is that I've, when I started out young and I studied philosophy and I studied theology and I studied all these different things, I studied history, and it was great. Like I was your classic opinionated young man. Yeah. I had lots of ideas about lots of things. But the greatest struggle I had with my spirituality was that I spoke about that which was beyond me. Right? And an old man once said to me, an elder can't be a novice. And what he was essentially saying to me as a young man, it's great you got all these opinions, but you're a novice. Yeah. And when you're an elder, you don't have opinions, you have a life.
Yeah.
Now I'm not trying to say if you're 30 or 20, well, wait till you're 60 and you've got a beard and no hair.
God, I hope I don't have a beard and no hair.
Yeah, not good for the ladies listening. But I'm not trying to forestall that. But I'm saying that the measure of the thing is in the substance that you live out of, not the words that talk about the substance. And I think that's great. I think that's powerful. And isn't it interesting? I don't know if you've noticed this, but people who live out of the substance, they tend to rely less on words. They tend to be the least opinionated person. Because once you possess something, I don't need to tell you about it. Have you ever noticed it?
Absolutely. And the funny part of that too is that they also don't lack clarity. Just because they lack words doesn't mean that they don't lack clarity.
Completely.
Often there's somebody who you look at and you know exactly what they stand for.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Cool.
That's a good one. That one's
I like
a challenging
that. I know.
one.
I really like that one. I also think that it's a little bit ironic that we talk about having opinions and overthinking as we shoot through all of these different pain points and give up.
But the challenge in these pain points is these are real pain points, and Way of the Heart is asking us to say, can you have a genuine embodied response to these things? Because you don't get through any pain point simply by forming a new opinion. You don't. Nothing in life gets solved by, like people might want to say, reframe it. Yeah, okay, you can reframe a context, but if you reframe it and then do nothing about it, the reframe doesn't work.
Yeah.
If you reframe an issue, and then that reframe empowers you to step in and to engage life in a different way and to create substance and weight and clarity from that reframe, then that's where the reframe's valuable, right? Just reframing it and getting new words about a topic doesn't change anything, doesn't shift anything.
Yeah. For it.
What's our next one?
Number 7, people feared emptiness and filled their lives with noise.
This is really playing around this very Eastern idea of emptiness, right? So going back to the conversation that we were having about absence and presence, when they talked about absence or emptiness, and emptiness is more the Buddhist version of it, the Taoist version of it is absence. But what they were essentially saying is that emptiness or absence was never emptiness as in void of substance. It was the domain where all substance emerges, and yet it's sitting in that space, having not taken on form. You know what I mean? So the thing is there, but it's not attached to. It hasn't taken on a form. It hasn't acquired an ego. It hasn't acquired a personality. It hasn't acquired identity. It hasn't built a reputation. It hasn't acquired property or business interests. It hasn't, it hasn't done all these things. It's void or empty of all of that. And so you often hear them talking about emptiness, where it's like emptying out the false self, emptying out the ego, emptying out the separate self, emptying out the persona, the personality, so it's this kind of, for them, it's not this stripping back to nothingness as in nil, it's a stripping back to the absolute essential thing that sits there. So, and they play with words like emptiness and absence, where in our mind, we automatically go, well, there's nothing there. But for them, it's going back to emptying everything else out other than what was the sort of the generative seed, So, and maybe that's a good way to look at it. You've got the seed of the plant, you've got nothing but the seed. You open up the seed, you crack open a seed, and what's inside a seed? It's nothing. You know what I mean? You cut a seed open, you just go, there's nothing inside of here. Like there's not a mini tree. Or the more you peel back, it's the observation that the more you peel back an essential thing, the less, it's almost like the less there is. It's becoming more like there's nothing here. Yeah, exactly. But the seed actually carries the seed, or the kernel of the seed actually carries everything. So it's an emptiness or an absence, which will become the fullness of presence and the fullness of everything. But it's existing in an unpolluted way. So it's very, very pure. It's very, very refined. I've probably done a clunky version of that, but do you get what I'm?
Oh, absolutely. This is an interesting one to bring into not reality, because it is reality, but this is an interesting one to bring out of existential dialogue and into present discussion. And I remember when I first was learning about absence and presence. And it didn't really
Land.
It didn't land with me to begin with until I sort of looked at it as everything comes from nothing.
Yeah.
And goes back into nothingness. And
Yeah.
so when I then think of emptiness or a gap in my life or whatever it is, it's not that there's a void there. It's that there is a something that is yet to take shape.
Completely.
And therefore it feels less daunting.
Yeah.
When you know that
Yeah.
there will be something, and that something is seasonal too, right? I think the easiest way for me to talk about this tangibly is with a job.
Yeah.
Or with an occupation, or even with Way of the Heart, right? Like my role or my involvement in Way of the Heart existed in absence, in potentiality,
Yes,
for a long period of time.
Yeah.
And then eventually, as things started to come together, it became more present until it is in the full form of presence that it is now. I'm here, I'm involved.
Yeah.
But then in the future,
it might float into absence
might
again.
float into absence, and that's fine. That reality, the me being involved, was always going to happen. It was always it was always there. It was just in different form. So it's a deep level, it's a high level conversation, it's a high level topic, and I think it's difficult to get your head around, especially when you're first hearing of it. But I think reframing emptiness as not being void or nothing, but emptiness as being full.
Yeah, and so all the wisdom traditions that I know of play with the idea that everything that is comes from nothing. I mean, the Bible, the biblical version of that is that God creates ex nihilo. That's when you do your Old Testament studies, you learn that creation comes into being ex nihilo, from nothing, from naught, like ex, from nothing, So all of the wisdom traditions are saying, something exists in nothingness. And we could say it exists in raw potentiality, but that's kind of, playing with maybe, more modern scientific terms. But, from nothing, from formlessness, from, as you would say, the void that is actually not a void. But what's in that void, everything comes from that. But the movement back to that is a peeling off of all the stuff that can't exist in that space. So Ram Dass would say that, humans experience the ego, the human ego experiences death as a complete disaster, because for the ego, it's the end of existence. But the human sliding into absence or dying or dissolving, the essence of that person doesn't experience it like that. Just the ego does, because the persona that you've built up, the personality that you've built up, isn't going to survive past that moment. It's going to die. It's like your house. I'm not taking my house into the next thing, neither am I taking my job title or my car or my postcode or, my books. I'm not taking my books with me, right? So when they're talking about, going back to the pain point, when they're talking about going back to emptiness, they're just really pointing to the fact that people's lives are so full of all this other stuff.
Yeah.
And it's not what they came with. It's not what's essential. And that no one is pursuing what is essential. Yeah. So, that resonates for Way of the Heart in a big way, because we're trying to say to people, you don't need to be bigger, better, best. You don't need to be smarter. You don't need another degree. You don't get another degree if you want one. But, it's not this process of addition. It's this process of allowing what is to unfold.
Yes.
So that's where it really resonates with Way of the Heart.
Yeah, and I think that's really important to land too, right? Because this, again, we can have this conversation and it be very esoteric. So going back to that key pain point of, which is being unable to live or exist within that emptiness, and instead going, I have to grasp onto whatever I can and
Yeah.
fill the void with stuff that doesn't actually
Yeah,
have
because-
anything to do with your essence.
Yeah, because we see people always on this journey of becoming.
Yeah.
You know, I'm trying to do, what are you trying to do? Oh, I'm trying to do this. I'm trying to do that. And in the trying to get there, they're trying to sell a becoming. I'm becoming this. I'm doing that. And that's sold to us from the get-go. When you're a big boy and you get a scooter, when you're a big boy and you get a bike, when you're a big boy and you can play soccer, when you're a big boy and you go to school, when you're a big boy and you go to high school, 60, when you're a big boy and your kids leave home. It's just like when you're a big boy and you get to retire and you just go, God, blimey, it's always just moving away. You know, finally a big boy, boom, you're dead. You know, it's like a bloody cruel joke, you know, like it's horrible. And so it's like there is no becoming, there is no everything that you are is already here.
Yeah.
And this is just an unfolding. And so, and you don't need an ego for that. You know, so dropping an ego is, you don't drop an ego because you become nobody, you drop an ego because you are already somebody. You know, like that's the beautiful thing. I don't need my ego. It's not serving me because it's not me. It's a fake version of me, you know. That's what they're pointing to then. It's a big concept, but it's a genuine pain point because look at everyone around us. Everyone's hustling.
Yeah.
Everyone's, you know.
Okay. Number 8. Humans outsourced their sense of authority.
Sure.
And then the little blurb is Confucian order demanded obedience. Today's culture demands conformity. Way of the heart, like Taoism, restores inner authority and authentic agency. So back to the pain point, humans outsourced their sense of authority.
Yeah, and it's interesting that they mentioned Confucius there because Confucius was a contemporary, maybe a little bit after Lao Tzu, might have met Lao Tzu, don't know. Contemporary probably of this guy called Zhuangzi, who was another big founding father in the Taoist school of thought. And Confucius, I don't think really was a Taoist in the pure sense of the return. Confucius was a guy that kept on hanging around the warring state periods, and his position was if we could come up with model ways of doing things, so we'll come up with civil codes, we'll come up with policies, we'll come up with this. So hence the famous anachronism, Confucius says.
Yeah.
Oh, you want to know how to get married? Well, Confucius says the way you should run a marriage, a civil matrimonial service is this. Oh, you want to run a government? Well, Confucius says the way you should do. Oh, you want to, you know, divide up food between people? Well, Confucius says the way you should do this. Do you know what I mean? It's almost like instead of people just standing in their own point of reference, it's like we've got to reference someone else. You know? I felt like this when, you know, like I loved writing Way of the Heart because it was poetry and I didn't have to reference someone else.
Yeah.
This is all me.
Yeah.
You know, I don't need, you know, now in my notes, you know, if I'm talking in the notes and I'm talking about attachment theory, then I'll reference someone who's talked about it. If I'm talking about trauma, I might reference Gabor Mate. If I'm talking about authenticity, I might, you know, reference Brene Brown or whoever, or, you know, like Sapolsky or whatever. But the point is, when you're constantly outsourcing your voice, you know, it's really interesting because I raised this issue. When you're constantly outsourcing your voice, you start to speak with a secondary voice.
Yeah.
And it has no authority.
Yeah.
You know, people who are parroting someone else's position. It's like, well, okay, fine, but that's someone else's position. And so in our Landscape of the Heart course, in the second unit of Landscape of the Heart, we talk about primary voice and secondary voice. And I realized that up until, you know, my mid-40s, pretty much I was always speaking a secondary voice. It was what someone else had said. And I'd often reference them and I'd often borrow their authority to, you know, and it's an outsourcing of authority. What do you say? What do you believe? What do you stand by? What's the ground of your being say? That's the challenge, I think. And I kind of think that's another modern day. I think people are scared to speak with their own voice.
Absolutely.
You know?
And this goes back to, there was a little point in the blurb about conformity. right? If you are not speaking with your voice, you're speaking with the voice that is popular, then it's safe, you belong, there's an element of conformity there. But again, we've talked about this in previous episodes. That's a form of self-betrayal too, right? Because you're not really
Yeah, it is.
yeah.
Yeah. And the beautiful anecdote to that is if you're in a situation and you don't have a particular perspective or voice because you don't have anything to say, then it's a really simple thing is
Don't say anything.
don't say anything.
Yeah.
You don't have to participate.
Why do we outsource authority? Because I mean, we do it from infancy, but why is this something that continually happens?
It's interesting. It's interesting what we ground the word authority in. Authority historically as a word has often been allied to power.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like someone with authority is someone who has influence or someone who has power, right? You know, they say, you know, don't look at what everyone says. You know, look at how many people follow someone out of the room. You know, if you think that if you have to tell people you're the leader and you walk out of the room and no one follows you, guess what? You're not the leader.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, the person who walks out of the room with everyone following them is probably the leader. You know, that person has influence. That influence creates that influence is the currency of power, and that power is the currency of authority, right? And I think sometimes we outsource our voice to people that we perceive have power, who have authority, right? I think we try to leverage influence with other people, or leverage credibility, or leverage social traction with other people by aligning ourselves to other voices that aren't our voice. You know, and I think that's a trap, because what happens is, you know, you find yourself aligning to something, and again, if it's not truly yours, then you still don't have the authority.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like you still don't.
Yeah.
So I think maybe that's part of the conversation in and around that. What do you think? Why do you think we do it?
I think we're scared. Or I think that there's an element there of wanting to belong or wanting to be safe. And I don't think that a lot of people want to be directly challenged on their power or their authorities or who they are, especially if they don't know it, or they're not firm in who they
Completely.
are. And so they borrow it from somebody else.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, it's funny too, this idea of power and authority, because this is again something that we're kind of taught what power and authority should look like.
Yeah.
And I actually think that genuine power and genuine authority probably looks very different to what we're taught that it looks like. I don't think
it completely is.
Yeah.
It completely is. In fact, the old word for inner authority and inner power, it's a word that we don't use anymore because it's laden with moralistic kind of overtones. But you'll hear Bergs use it, who's a Buddhist teacher. He says, when you get serious about maintaining your virtue, right? He's not talking about chastity. He's not talking about, he's not talking about, some kind of moralistic thing. Virtue is inner strength. It's a strength that you actually possess, right? It's the strength of substance. It's the strength of connectedness to ground of being. This is why this point's so way of the heart, because it's like way of the heart is taking us back to the place where you have real strength, which is being you. You know, that's where your virtue resides. Your virtue resides in being the best, in not even being the best version of just being Jess. You know, that's your power. You know, that's your virtue. That's your strength. That's your authority. I can't be a Jess the same way you can be a Jess. If I try to be you, I've got to pretend and become something that I'm not in order to be you. Same way, you can't be me. No one else can be someone else. We like to reference other people, but the reality is true virtue is being found in the ground of your own being. You know, so when we're referencing someone, it's probably a subtle indicator that we're not standing in the ground of our own being, but we're trying to borrow influence from someone else.
Mm.
I see that a lot.
Yeah.
You know, I see that a lot on social media. You see that a lot. You see that a lot in the social dialogue around public philosophy, social philosophy, and how society should operate. There's a lot of people parrot what a lot of other people say.
Absolutely.
You know, that's why we get, that's why we're seeing globally a massive resurgence in, neo-nationalism and right-wing stuff, because people are disenfranchised. They listen to a popular voice that makes a claim about their rights, and we're off to the races. And if you sat one of those people down and said, "Really, is what you really believe in?" It's like, it's pretty toxic, some of this stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting too. And I don't want to go too deep into this
into the politics of it.
Well, because we could wax lyrical about it forever. Yeah. But, it's interesting if you really do dig. A lot of people who would proclaim to hold that opinion, if you get down beyond what they've heard and what they're parroting, there's nothing there. And so it just becomes an aggressive attack on somebody else. And that's it. Yeah. And that's kind of the fallback.
Yeah, and that would be not just for our our right-wing friends or our neo-nationalists. That would be for almost any person that adopts a position by virtue of, signing up to the popular narrative and just going, okay, does that really reside in you? Is that really a reflection of your original voice, or is this just secondary voice?
Yeah.
Are we borrowing influence here? Are we borrowing authority here? Or is this something that really comes from you? And a lot of the time it doesn't come from the person.
Yeah. I think
that's the point, right?
Yeah, and that question stands well beyond politics as well.
No, it's like a friend I used to have said to me, you got to smoke what you're selling.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, and if you're not, then you're not.
Yeah.
So that's that point.
Okay. Next one.
Number 9.
Number 9.
Okay.
This is going to be interesting because you were just talking about virtue.
Oh, okay.
But I think this one kind of flips it on its head.
Okay.
Virtue became performance.
Yeah.
And then we've got Taoism critiqued manufactured goodness.
Yeah, great.
And Way of the Heart addresses the modern spiritual identity crisis, looking like being a good person instead of being aligned.
Yeah, great. I mean, it's a very similar idea, right?
Yeah.
It's coming back to, people are in pain because we're being something that we're not.
Mm-hmm.
Pretending to be good, pretending to have a position that we don't have, pretending to be something that we're not.
Mm-hmm.
Playing a role.
Yeah.
It destroys us.
And we've had this conversation recently a couple times over the past sort of week or so, that virtue signaling is not a substitute for personality, really. It's a bit of it's not.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a bit gauche of me to say, but, there's only so far that pretending or being outraged or, jumping onto a bandwagon will get you, right?
It doesn't work. It's not real, so there's nothing to connect to.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing for someone else to connect to, Again, I mean, that was the great challenge of when I was as a young man. I had a lot of opinions about a lot of stuff. I had a lot of convictions about a lot of stuff. That's fine. Where do they take root in your life? And I think we see the same thing now. It kind of feel like we're hovering around the same thing, but it just challenges us not to be picking up on the latest thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the latest trend, or the latest moral trend, or the latest latest social dialogue.
I think that's an easy one. That can be a quick one.
Yeah.
And then the last one is people chased future improvement rather than present truth.
Wow.
And again, this is that fixation on becoming, right?
Yeah, I think that as back then, they were trying to, each of those warring states were trying to build up, authority, and they were trying to build up power, and they were trying to overcome other states, and they were trying to create another kind of season of another version of a dynasty that would last, a government that would last. And so the orientation was always like, let's get this thing happening. Let's take this bit of land. We can conquer them. They're smaller. Let's form this government. Let's do this alliance. But.
Mm.
You can play that in your own life. You can be doing the same thing in your own life. It's what I vaguely call the hustle.
Mm-hmm.
That you're hustling, trying to make stuff happen, trying to get to here, trying to do that, trying to do this deal, trying to get this sorted, or acquire this or acquire that. I just think I think at one point, you only really get to live in this moment. I mean, this is the contribution of Eckhart Tolle. The conversation of, have you ever been to the past? Have you ever been to the future? No, you can only ever be in the present.
Yeah.
So it's an eternal now is where we're at. And it's not to say that you don't make plans for the future, but it's like you can't live there. And I think sometimes what we do is I know I've done it, is that we outsource our sense of health and our sense of wellness in a projected reality that has no substance.
Mm.
I'm feeling good. How are you feeling? Good. Oh, because we're going to be going on this holiday, like we're off for 8 weeks, and then project. And then then you get in the holiday and you go, oh, the holiday was a lot about sitting in airports and buses, and the holiday was a lot about lining up behind smelly people that I didn't really like,
Yeah.
It was a lot about being tired. It was, so like, but it's almost like sometimes the projection is better than the reality.
Yeah.
Which isn't to say I've just been on a holiday for 8 weeks with Bloss, and yes, we did project for sure, and the holiday was roundly wonderful, but it's over, it's done, it's gone. And so what do we project? Another thing, then we project another thing, and this is a very human trait, right? We're constantly projecting, we're constantly moving it forward, and like Eckhart Tolle will say, we just got to come back to a present moment. This is where we're at. And the quality of life is what we're experiencing now.
And it's funny, in that little pain point, people chased future improvement rather than present truth. I think that there is something to be said for, yes, sitting in the present moment, but also showing up for the truth or the reality of what is actually in this moment.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I think it's easy to distort or lie about or trick yourself with a very convincing narrative about a future that hasn't eventuated.
Yes. Yeah.
And you're not actually showing up for
Yeah.
what you need to show up for, which is happening now, right now.
Yeah. No. So you never see a business sign that says we don't believe in future improvement. We believe in present excellence. Do you know what I mean? It's like our friend David said to us, stop improving.
Yeah. Yeah.
Stop seeking to improve.
Yeah.
Just be.
Yeah.
Just give it all you've got right at this moment.
Yeah.
And if you're not sort of projecting, we're going to be better, we're going to be bigger, we're going to be more. If you're not if you're not projecting in the upward trajectory, but you're just really bringing your whole personhood to this current moment, that's the way we need to live.
Totally. And that's deeply in line with flow too, right? When we look at flow as being this river, just be at the point that you're at with the river. Don't worry about, are there going to be rapids? Is there going to be a waterfall? Maybe if I swim in this particular direction, I'm going to land on a nice breezy bank. It's like, just you're in it. Just be in it.
Completely. Yeah.
Because otherwise you rob yourself of this moment. You rob yourself of the lessons that are to be learnt now, the growth that is to be had
100%.
now, and the depth of essence, or experiencing your essence that you have now.
Completely. Yeah, completely. And that applied back then, where they were projecting all these different states that they wanted to be part of. And the Taoist just says, you know what? Not interested. Many of the Taoists just went and lived in the mountains. They screwed
Gosh, don't you
crops.
wish sometimes though that you could go and live in the mountains?
I just have. We're in the treehouse now.
It's true.
You know, like I have just been doing that.
That's true.
So yeah, and here's the thing. Every single person that we're talking to now can find their own version of that.
Yeah.
Right? And they don't even have to find their own version of that. They can surrender to their version of that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not a mythical wonderland. You know, but what it is the Taoists they just walked out on one version of being and embraced a more authentic version of being. You know, they went from being artist intellectuals and high government officials to bloody sharecrop farmers.
Yeah.
Right? And you go, well, they traded down. Yeah, they did. They traded down, but then they actually had time for their poetry. They had time for their calligraphy. They had time for their martial arts. They had time for meditation. They had time to form philosophical communities and places where they got together and spoke. They got time to develop how to make wine, and but the creating of that culture of artistic substance and philosophical depth and relatability was not off the back of high culture. It was off the back of a simplified version, a simplified life, a more elemental life. It sounds so romantic, but in practical terms, it meant probably leaving comfort, leaving stability, leaving a bunch of different things over here where they were a someone, and walking into nothingness. This is why when I was doing this in my own life, Ram Dass's words was, seek to be nobody because nobody's really something. It was like, that's just the best thing I've ever heard. Because it was like, strive to be nobody, strive to be a nothing, because that's actually because there's already something there. It's going back to maybe one of the earlier discussions, but yeah, I mean, everyone can do it. Everyone can do it.
Yeah, and everyone can do it in a way that is authentic and in line with them.
And well, it has to be.
We're not actually saying become nobody. I think what we're saying is figure out what real, genuine presence and embodiment of essence looks like for you. And that doing that, maybe the things that subsequently calls you to do might be challenging.
Well, it's challenging, but it's the only thing that you can genuinely reach for that has substance. And so we kind of, yes, we're not just wanting you all to go out there and be nobodies, because you already are a somebody. You already are a someone. And all the stuff that we're adding to that most of the time has no relevance. All the improvements that we're making to that sometimes aren't improvements at all.
Yeah.
Sometimes that promotion isn't what we need. Sometimes the next step up the ladder isn't what we need. Sometimes we need to take a few steps down. For me, I didn't get further up the tree. I jumped out of the tree, looked at the tree and went, why the frick was I climbing that tree?
Yeah.
So anyway, there are pain points. There's 10 pain points that are borrowed from obviously the Taoist tradition, which I resonate with. But there are also, I think, 10 pain points that are real in our world now. And like I said, they're a little bit left of centre, but I hope you've enjoyed our heart riffing in and around these pain points. We'll see you next one.
Thank you for listening to Heart Riffing. If today's conversation resonated, you can find more of our work, including courses, mentoring, and workshops, at www.wayoftheheart.com.au or on our Instagram, Way of the Heart Official. We'd love to hear your thoughts, reflections, or questions, so please always feel free to message or comment. We look forward to seeing you next time.